Hello, good evening. Coming up on the Politics Hub at 7 o'clock, a moment of history in Parliament as MPs gather in the Commons for the first time. And Starmer gives his first speech as Prime Minister as a new Labour government gets rid of the phrase levelling up, angering Boris Johnson. The new PM praises its diversity as Rishi Sunak promises a professional and effective opposition. As the new government gets rid of the phrase levelling up, angering Boris Johnson, I'll be asking the new housing minister why. Meanwhile, the Conservative rebuilding process continues as it elects a new chair of the 1922 committee, which will help decide who will succeed Rishi Sunak. Also tonight, the Prime Minister prepares to rally allies in their support for Ukraine as he heads to Washington for the NATO summit. And as Westminster is flooded with new MPs trying to decode the weird and wonderful world of Westminster, we'll be testing your Commons knowledge. All that and more with Mercy Muriki and Matt Levender, who'll be with me for the next hour. It's Tuesday, I'm Ali Fortescue, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Good evening. Well, the House of Commons returned today and the rarely seen magic of our political system unfolded before our eyes. Power was transferred from one party to another, not only without a shot being fired, but without even a voice raised in anger. Instead, the changing of the guard was signified by the simple act of sitting in a different part of a small chamber in Westminster. From Rishi Sunak on the opposition benches, for the first time in his career, a sombre concession of defeat and a pledge that the new Conservative opposition would do its duty to hold the government to account. Change was everywhere you looked. More women MPs, the most diverse Commons ever, and a Liberal Democrat Party taking up the most room of any third party in 100 years. The future represented by over 300 people setting foot in the Commons chamber for the very first time, including, of course, the self-styled new kids on the block of Nigel Farage and his Reform colleagues. But there was institutional memory in the House too. Sir Edward Lee, the new father of the House after 41 years of service. Diane Abbott, the new mother of the House, to whom Sir Keir Starmer paid tribute as someone who'd fought for a parliament that truly, he said, represents modern Britain. Soon, regular service, the political pantomime during the theatrics will, of course, resume. But today, for a brief moment, we witnessed Parliament at its very best. Well, let's see.
This is what victory looks like. Overflowing government benches and newbie Labour MPs in the gangways rubbing shoulders with the cabinet. After a record win, a Prime Minister who can afford to look gracious. All sides backing the re-election of this man, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, to continue as the 158th Commons Speaker, overseeing a new Parliament that looks very different.
The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer.
We have the opportunity and the responsibility to put an end to a politics that has too often seemed self-serving and self-obsessed.
The Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
This man's still facing the same opponent, and he will be for some time to come, according to the rules of the leadership contest released today.
Let me begin with a message to those who are no longer sitting behind me. I am sorry. We have lost too many diligent, community-spirited representatives.
Nigel Farage.
On a day of consensus, one man sought the limelight with a personal attack.
You have brought tremendous dignity to the role as Speaker, and it is, I must say, in marked contrast to the little man that was there before you and besmirched the office so dreadfully.
Over the road in Downing Street, England's mayors gathered with good intentions and plans for collaboration. 10 of these faces Labour. One, Tees Valley Mayor Ben Houchen, a Conservative who just days ago was the face of levelling up.
Congratulations.
Today, congratulating the Deputy Prime Minister hours after she axed the name levelling up from her government department.
I'm a great believer in devolution. I'm a great believer in the idea that those with skin in the game, those that know their communities, make much better decisions than people sitting in Westminster and Whitehall.
More areas to get mayors, more powers for existing mayors, That means more demands in the in-tray of the Prime Minister, including on issues you thought had been settled.
It's not about going back to HS2, though, Kay. We accept that has gone. What it is about doing is having an alternative to the West Coast main line when those HS2 trains start running between London and Birmingham.
Across town, a man who knows how it's done, hosting a conference and making clear government isn't easy.
I remember the biggest shock for me was coming into power, sitting around the cabinet table, thinking I had this huge majority, and thinking, well, since I'm the Prime Minister, if I say something should happen, something's going to happen. Nothing happened.
His successor has promised change. Don't expect it to be completely smooth.
So he's got the experience, he's had the time in opposition, really no excuses for getting it wrong.
They're always going to be excuses. But look, we didn't get everything right. This government won't get everything right, but the important thing is you get more things right than wrong.
Unity in Westminster. Next stop, Washington, for bonding with world leaders, building goodwill while he can. Sam Coates, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, the old cliché of a picture being worth a million words was definitely true today. Let's take a look at what the pictures we saw in the Commons today tell us about the reshaping of politics. Who better to do that with than Sam Coates? You've had a busy day. Tell us a bit about this. It's like the first day at school, isn't it?
It is. On command of the King, unlike your first day at school. MPs came and re-elected this man, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the 158th Speaker, to oversee the Commons chamber all the way through the next Parliament. Now, you can tell from this that the House of Commons is really busy. You can see all the people here, but that's not that unusual. That's what happens when 643 MPs turn up to work, as happens because, of course, Sinn Féin doesn't come. But I'm going to show you what is unusual with a little trick. I'm going to turn the camera around and look at this picture from the reverse angle. Here we go. You can see down, the Speaker is down here, and you can see, and this way, you can see much more clearly what's going on. So this is the government benches, and these are the opposition benches. And the key thing is that this is the gangway in between the two sides. It's filled with Labour MPs, as is the gangway all the way up to the door. So you can see lots and lots of additional Labour MPs squeezing to get on. All the benches are packed. Look just how tightly they are packed down there. Whereas on this side, much less of that, and no sign of anybody needing to really stand in the gangway there. So you can see how the Commons Chamber's geography and composition has changed. Let's look at a few specifics. This is going to become a very familiar scene. This is Keir Starmer, his first time at the dispatch box from this side as Prime Minister next to Lucy Powell and the Chief Whip, Alan Campbell. He's who you're going to see when you've been bad, if you're a Labour MP. More whips. Quite close to Diane Abbott. Keir Starmer paid tribute to Diane Abbott, notably Diane Abbott had no such kind words for Keir Starmer. We're going to watch that relationship. But this is the makeup of the front bench that we'll get used to. More interesting, arguably, is Rishi Sunak from the other side. There you can see the newly minted leader of the opposition there standing at the that side of the dispatch box. The thing about this, look at the faces. James Cleverly, he could end up interim leader after Rishi Sunak. He doesn't exactly look happy. Oliver Dowden's face, a picture that tells 1,000 words. Jeremy Hunt might have been re-elected in Guildford in a shock result. He doesn't look happy either. But there are some members of the opposition benches, including the one just by your head, Ali, Ed Davey, who is. Let's go and look in a little bit closer at Ed Davey. Now, the Liberal Democrats came back with over 70 MPs, and they had one big aim in this election, which was to come back to being the third largest party. Because in 2015, that crown, if you just go up a little bit, was taken by the SNP. And when that happened, the SNP moved to the front row and the Liberal Democrats moved back. And today, that has been reversed. So you can see all the smiling faces of Liberal Democrat MPs because they are back where they think they rightfully should be, on the front bench, again, of the opposition. And you can see. Now, I want you to remember where he's sitting, so we're going to come back to him in just a second. He's Stephen Flynn, the Westminster leader of the SNP. Now, here is a familiar face. Nigel Farage. He's sitting effectively in what I call the naughty corner. It's the back bit of the opposition benches. And there he is, surrounded by all sorts of other MPs. He is going to root himself there for the rest of the Parliament, it looks like. But let's try and trace exactly where that is in the wider House of Commons by looking at this picture. Now, I told you to remember where Stephen Flynn, the SNP leader, was. And you can see him down There he is. Here he is. So if you remember, he was there in the last period. That's when Nigel Farage is here, next to Gavin Robinson, the DUP leader, sort of a band of different opposition MPs here. So that's where they are in the basically the sort of top right if you're looking into the Commons. And look at this guy. This is a representative of a political party that's never been there before. It's the leader of the traditional unionist voice, Jim Allister. He's a sort of hardline unionist in Northern Ireland. And he's sitting, fascinatingly, right next to Nigel Farage, but also next to some of the independent candidates that campaigned on the issue of Gaza. So that really is a kind of an odd collection of people in front of the nationalist column. Eastwood, the SDLP leader, and George Freeman, a Tory MP. So really a sort of smorgasbord of different political parties there. But this is the big picture, Ali. You can see there's a cabinet minister rubbing shoulders with new MPs, with the new speaker there. The Commons geography has changed remarkably in just a matter of a few weeks. But this is what it's going to look like for years to come.
Incredible to see. I mean, yeah, it's a bit disorientating, isn't it? We're so used to seeing the Conservatives on the other side. I mean, this is a nitty-gritty that we love to see on the Hubs. Sam, thank you so much. Incredible knowledge from you. Well, the Commons is, of course, sure to feature in tomorrow's papers. We'll have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the broadcaster and journalist Jenny Kleeman and the CEO of Total Politics Group, Mark Wallace. Well, shortly before coming on air, I spoke to Matthew Pennycook. He's a Minister of State at the newly renamed Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Just firstly, I guess on a personal level, you've been an MP for about 10 years. What was it like today?
It was a very different swearing-in ceremony, obviously, from previous parliaments. And just for my own part on our side, just the sheer number of Labour MPs on the government benches was obviously incredible to see. But it feels like a very different parliament and one that I think is going to do some very good things for the country in terms of that programme of national renewal that Keir Starmer talked about.
Did it feel a bit surreal being on the government benches?
It feels very good after 14 years of opposition, but more importantly, I think it's important for what we think we can do for the country. Keir was talking about public service this afternoon in the remarks he made. We want to be a party and a government that is dedicated to public service, but also that mission of national renewal for the country. We think we've got the plans to turn things around in a variety of areas, not least housing planning, which is my brief. OK, let's talk a bit about housing, because you've pledged to build 1.5 million homes in this parliament. You've also talked about bringing back mandatory targets. Your estimate, one estimate suggests that you need to build 1,150 homes every single day, working day, to get there. Councils say that they're going to need more support. I mean, it's incredibly ambitious. Are you going to be giving councils more support? It's a very stretching target. We know that, but we think it's absolutely necessary because we've got an acute and intensifying housing crisis after 14 years of Conservative government, and it's holding back our economy. Planning in particular is a huge constraint on growth. So we need lots of different actors to build, private developers, but councils are going to have to play a greater part too when it comes to that house building drive. Apparently there's a huge talent shortage, according to the Federation of Master Builders. How are you going to train people? Are you going to need to take in people from abroad to fill those gaps? The previous government actually implemented a temporary work visa to bring more construction workers in. That's part of the answer. I think we've also got to train more of British nationals, if you like, to take on those jobs. That's what my colleague, the Secretary of State for Education, will be doing through that skills agenda in local areas. But we've also got to look at things like modular construction and how we can look at different methods to build. But absolutely right on the construction side, but also on the planning system side, there's a real capacity issue and we've got to take urgent steps to address it. So you accept that there's a kind of gap there, there's a problem? There is a problem and we have to take steps to address it, absolutely, both on the construction and planning side. I want to talk to you about slogan, because you've taken, not you personally, but Labour have taken the word levelling up out of the department title. And I'm actually going to read you a Boris Johnson tweet. Axing levelling up shows a lack of ambition and a failure to believe in this country's potential. Labour will axe Brexit next. Then they will pointlessly whack up taxes. The drift backwards has begun. To be fair to Boris Johnson, he did get a majority in 2019, and part of that pledge was about levelling up. Is this that you don't believe in levelling up? No, I think that quote is absolute nonsense, and I'd expect nothing less from the former Prime Minister. We think that levelling up, in the way that the government approached it, was a gimmick. It ran through the department's title. It was not felt by communities. And what we had too often was communities held back, forced to bid to come to Whitehall to beg for small pots of money in different areas. We are taking a whole government approach to regional inequality. It's got to run through everything we do. So the ambition remains. The problem, if you like, the diagnosis was right. We take issue with how the government addressed it and how specifically our department addressed it. We want to get back to basics. We're going to do what we say on the tin. For us, that's housing communities.
You say it's a gimmick, but I mean, it's basically a slogan, isn't it? And Labour have their own slogans, you know, party before country change. What's wrong with the slogan?
Well, party before country isn't a slogan, it's an approach, and it's one we will
levelling up
stick to. Well, levelling up as the way the previous government implemented it was a gimmick, and as I said, it wasn't felt by communities in the way that it
But it was obviously something that people wanted, whether it worked or not.
They did want it, and they did want it, and I think they feel incredibly let down that it hasn't been delivered in the way they expected. As I said, we're going to take a whole government approach to regional inequality. It's not just going to be a gimmick and a slogan stuck on a department wall, if you like. It's going to run through everything we do.
Do you think levelling up is, I guess, a noble aspiration at least?
The aspiration to address inequalities between regions and within regions is absolutely the right one. And it's the failure of the previous government not to do enough on that agenda. We are going to get things done where they've failed.
All right. I want to ask you about Renters Reform Bill, because this is something you've been talking about for a long time. How quickly is that going to come back?
It's a priority. We're taking steps to bring it forward as early as we possibly can. We've got to make... I'm not going to give you a timeline. We're only a couple of days into a new Labour government. It remains a priority for us. We're working at pace to overhaul the legislation that the previous government failed to take through. If you remember, 5 years they had to honour their commitment to abolish Section 21 no-fault evictions. They didn't do it. They didn't push it through in the wash-up in the last Parliament, despite our offer to take it through. We've got to take the steps to bring forward a piece of legislation that's robust, that delivers for renters, that decisively levels the playing field between tenants and landlords. We'll do that as soon as we possibly can.
I want to ask you a bit about Tony Blair. He has been full of advice since you guys have won the election. Is that welcome advice? Do you think he's backseat driving?
No, always happy to listen to advice from Tony and anyone else who's served in the last Labour government. They've got a huge amount of experience and insight about what we need to do, but we'll take our own distinctive approach as a new government.
When you say your own distinctive approach, does that mean you'll ignore Tony Blair if you need to?
No, that's not what I said at all. You're putting words into my mouth.
No, just asking.
We won't ignore, always would listen to advice from Tony on this and many other areas, but we've got an agenda that we set out in our manifesto, a programme for national renewal. That's our absolute focus. And in my area, tackling the housing crisis and therefore boosting economic growth is what we're absolutely focused on.
Tony Blair said that the UK will need to be part of a political family on the continent. Is that something that you agree with?
We do need closer cooperation with our European partners. We set out precisely in our manifesto what that looks like. That will be a renegotiated trade and cooperation agreement. We think the government previously got a very thin deal. It's not doing much for our economy. We think we can have a closer economic relationship in a way that benefits the UK and a closer relationship when it comes to security and defence.
I want to ask you a bit about Diane Abbott, because Keir Starmer paid tribute to her in the Commons today. I mean, it just felt a little bit rich, given that at the start of the election, it wasn't even clear if she was going to be allowed to stand for the party.
She did stand. I thought it was welcome, the tribute that Keir paid, because I think everyone in the House, returning MP or new MP, recognises the contribution that Diane has made, the glass ceilings that she smashed, and how she is therefore viewed amongst the public, particularly in the black community, for breaking those glass ceilings. So I think it was welcome that he made the statement about her.
I mean, he hasn't exactly been an enthusiastic supporter of her over this campaign, has he?
I don't think that's fair to say. She stood as a Labour candidate. She's been elected as Labour MP as part of the new government. And I know that she'll be as focused as any of us on delivering that manifesto agenda, delivering that national renewal that Keir spoke about.
OK, Matthew Pennycook, thank you so much for joining us. And can I lastly just ask, I mean, we did touch on the personal stuff at the start, but have you managed to get a bit of rest since the election?
Not much rest, much rest. Yeah, there's a lot of decisions to be taken if we're going to go. And as you've seen, we hit the ground running in the last 72 hours.
OK, well, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's bring in our duo for this evening, shall we? Mercy Muroki, the former Conservative Special Advisor, and Matt Lavender, former Labour Special Advisor. Thanks both for joining us. Matthew, let's start with you, because you used to work with Lisa Nandy in the Levelling Up department. What do you think of this rename?
I think Matt Pennycook is right that it was a bit of a gimmick. I think it really did speak to a lot of people in that 2019 election, and I think Labour for a while had a bit of a challenge on working out what to do with the phrase levelling up, because they knew that it resonated with people and they didn't want to be seen to be sort of moving away from that. But I think over time...
Does it look like they're moving away from that, though?
Well, I think what was exposed over the duration of the last Parliament was that it was a bit of a gimmick. I think the biggest challenge, in some ways, the fact that the name has been taken out of the department actually speaks to the biggest problem, which was that they put levelling up in the title, they kind of gave it to a sort of department and said, can you go and fix this? Whereas realistically, if you want to actually achieve levelling up, fixing regional inequalities, growing economies all around the country, the only real way to do that is from the Treasury with strong backing from the Prime Minister. That existed very briefly under Boris Johnson, but then was subsumed when he was mired in scandal, and it never really came back under any of his successors. So I don't think it's particularly significant that they've dropped the name. I think the real challenge is going to be whether Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner are kind of all committed to an agenda which seeks to achieve the same thing. And if they are, they might be able to do something, but that will be the real test of whether they can level up or whatever they want to call it.
Mercy, I just want to talk a bit about this kind of the vibes on the first day at school, first day back in Parliament. What did you think when you saw those pictures? I mean, it's a bit kind of disorientating. We're so used to the Conservatives being on the government side. We're so used to Commons looking a certain way. And I guess, you know, the Reform MPs as well, there's so much change, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And we were actually talking about how, you know, we haven't been adults under a Labour government. So this is definitely new to us. And the number of new MPs there are as well, it just looks like a completely unfamiliar place. Look, that's democracy. I think all of us agree that we welcome democracy. And so obviously the Conservatives have been massively reduced the number of seats. And I think it will be a period of reflection for the Conservatives looking around the House. It will feel really visceral and real suddenly that they have lost so many MPs that they do need to seriously reconsider what they're going to do with the party. I know we'll be speaking about who might be the next leader later on. So I think I welcome, it's an exciting time politically to, you know, have a new change of government and to see where things go. But I do think, you know, coming from a Conservative perspective, this would have been a massive wake-up call. This would have been the first time they've realised we really have lost this election, haven't we? And it will be a time to reflect.
Yeah, a lot of gloomy faces and House of Commons. I saw the Lee Anderson tweet, the fox is in the hen house. What do you think Reform are going to have, you know, going to be able to have an actual impact when there's only 5 of them?
I think they will have some impact. I think to some extent the novelty might wear off. I mean, maybe that will prove not to be the case. But I think when you get over this initial period where there's a novelty factor to Nigel Farage being there, you have these smaller parties, everything looks a bit different. I think people might go, well, yes, they've got 5, but Labour have got more than 400. In substantive terms, it's actually going to be the Labour Party that sets the agenda, at least for the next few years. And so I expect we'll hear a lot from Nigel Farage, and there are certain issues on which I think he could cause some problems, but I think it's also possible to exaggerate the impact that one man or 5 MPs can have on a government with such a big majority. And I think Keir Starmer's mission will be to get on, get some stuff done, show some progress, and that will, I think, neuter the attacks that Nigel Farage will sort of seek to launch on him.
And someone that might have impact from outside is Tony Blair. We were talking a bit about that. He's had this conference today. He hasn't been shy in kind of coming forward with his ideas. Mercy, do you think he's going to be the kind of, you know, puppet master behind the scenes, or do you think Keir Starmer's going to be ignoring some of his advice?
I hope not. I think, you know, Keir Starmer, the job he has now is to show that he's in charge. You know, he keeps talking about how he's been responsible for changing the face of the party. He's going to want to completely take control of the party and take ownership of what this new party looks like. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be a great look or a great strategy for him to be seen to be looking to old Labour leaders for advice. Of course, Tony Blair, you know, he was an incredibly successful Prime Minister, incredibly successful Labour leader, so he will have advice, sure. But I think if Keir Starmer does want to forge his own way and forge this new Labour government, then he will have to show that he's his own man with his own policies.
Interested to hear your view very briefly on this.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's enormously helpful to have a former Prime Minister sort of taking some attention on your first week, but I don't think there's any risk of him being a kind of backseat driver. I think actually at the last time Tony Blair held a conference like this, he appeared on stage with Keir Starmer, and that really felt like a moment where Keir Starmer felt comfortable with him, but also showing that he was his own man and his own leader.
We've seen it.
We've seen a lot of him. I'm not necessarily sure there will have been quite as much Tony Blair in the first week grid as Labour would have planned. But I think ultimately Keir Starmer is flying off to Washington. He's the Prime Minister at NATO, and that's the main image they'll get.
OK, thank you both. We'll come back to you very soon. You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. The Conservatives regroup after their election drubbing as the party takes the first steps towards electing a new leader.
So we're very excited at Square Cut, the production company I formed when I left Sky, because we think that America's really going to embrace cricket. They did very well in the recent World Cup. They made it through to the final 8. They beat Pakistan, and they're a coming force. And going on at the moment is a tournament called the MLC, Major League Cricket. It's a league made up of the likes of San Francisco, Washington, Seattle. 6 clubs play each other, then there's a knockout round, and by the end of July, there's a World Cup. And we're producing a podcast, US Cricket Daily, available on Amazon and Spotify and Apple, TikTok, Instagram, where you can look back on the day's play, and we look forward to the next day's game. Cricket is coming to America in a big way.
Do they understand it?
Yeah, they do. In fact...
Because when you're out, you're in, and when you're in, you're out.
America played Canada in September 1844, 30 years before England played Australia.
Oh, OK.
America was ahead of the game, as they are in so many ways. They give them a run for the money on a good day. They've got some good players. And the big thing about the MLC, the Major League Cricket Tournament, is the players come from all over the world. They've got the likes of Pat Cummins, the Australian captain, playing at the moment for the San Francisco team. Ponting is the coach of the Washington team. They're attracting good players. It's going to be an exciting league. T20 is the fastest growing format of cricket around the globe.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolution. It's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching the Politics Hub on Sky News. The top stories this evening. The House of Commons has returned after the election, with Rishi Sunak pledging to be an effective opposition to the new government. The Conservatives elect a new chair to the 1922 committee as a new shadow cabinet meets for the very first time. And Sir Keir Starmer has called on allies to strengthen their resolve against Russia as he departs for Washington for the NATO summit. You can stay up to date with all the goings on in Westminster on our digital politics hub by scanning the QR at the bottom of your screen. Among the other stories we've been covering that you can read about today, 65 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday after being rescued in the Channel by UK Border Force. Meanwhile, 3 asylum seekers who brought legal action over their potential removal to Rwanda had their cases resolved at the High Court after the new Labour government decided to scrap the deportation policy. The first bit of bad economic news for the new government today, as the British technology company Dyson, famous of course for its vacuum cleaners, announced it's cutting around 1,000 jobs in the UK. The company employs around 3,500 people in Britain, many at its site in Malmesbury in Wiltshire. All that and much more, just scan the QR code at the bottom of your screen. Well, the Tory rebuild began today, first on the agenda, electing a new chair of the 1922 committee. But even that first step has been causing a bit of upset. In a moment, we'll go to Darren McCaffrey, who's at an important gathering for the Conservative establishment this evening. We'll come on to that. But first, Tamara Cohen joins me from Central Lobby. Tamara, it sounds like there's been a bit of controversy. Tell us what's happened.
Yes, the Conservatives have been in a committee room this evening appointing a new chair of the 1922 committee. That's their committee of backbenchers, and it matters because they have an important role organising a leadership election, which many suspect could happen in the not too distant future. Now, the new chair of that committee, there was 2 people who put themselves forward, 2 MPs, and the victorious one was Bob Blackman, he's a Harrow East MP who beat Geoffrey Clifton Brown. Now, there were claims afterwards that a lot of Tory MPs did not get a chance to vote in this election because they were told the wrong time for it. So when they turned up, they were then turned away and not allowed to vote. Now, one of those we caught up with was the former Defence Minister Mark Francois, and this is what he told me had happened and why he was so angry about it.
What's happened is the 1922 committee have come up with one set of timings. The whips have told Tory MPs there was another set. A lot of Tory MPs didn't get a chance to vote. The result is void. We should do it again next week, where it's absolutely crystal clear what the timings and the rules are, and then we can elect a 1922. What's gone on?
We'll see if they decide to rerun it. But on the sort of substance of it, and they're going to be overseeing what might be a leadership contest in the coming months.
That's why it's so important. And you can't allow a small number of ex-officers on the 1922 committee to basically slew the result.
So he says it was a null and void election. Now, afterwards, I caught up with Geoffrey Clifton Brown, Sir Geoffrey, in fact, who was the losing candidate. He said he didn't think that they would rerun that again. So Bob Blackman is the MP in charge, and it is expected by many Tory MPs that Rishi Sunak, now the leader of the opposition, will have a chat with Mr Blackman and tell him what his intentions are. And many suspect that at some point in the next few months, potentially just after the party conference in the autumn, he will be stepping down as leader, and the many leadership hopefuls, some of whom Darren will be seeing no doubt at the Spectator Party tonight, will be trying to pitch to Conservative MPs for support. There have been questions swirling about whether there might be a change in the rules which at the moment give the party members the final say on who the leader is. But Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown, who was speaking at those hustings, actually told MPs that the members couldn't be denied a vote there because they are the ones who go around, pounding the pavements during elections, and they pay their subs, and this is one of the few privileges they get. So the feeling among many is it will be very difficult to take that right away from the Conservative Party members.
Fascinating stuff. Thanks so much, Tamara. We've seen how busy that job can be. Well, as the Conservative Parliamentary Party, or what's left of it, gathered in Parliament, perhaps a more important crucible for the future of the party is going on this evening. That is the Spectator Summer Party, where Darren McCaffrey is. What have you been hearing, Darren? You're on the inside track there.
Yeah, a very good evening from what is meant to be a summer party. I can tell you it is anything but summer here. Maybe reflective of the mood inside the Conservative Party, given that drubbing they had last week at the election. But lots of Conservative politicians, you're right, have turned up tonight. We've seen lots of former cabinet ministers and indeed, it should be said, a few celebrities as well. Nigel Farage is just about to walk by me, who I've spoken to a little bit earlier. I'll talk about him in 1 minute if I can. But what's really fascinating, if you like, about all of this is actually the conversation is not tonight about who should take over the Conservative Party, who should lead them in opposition. It's much more about this process, whether this leadership contest needs to be sorted as soon as possible, i.e. over the next month or so ahead of the party conference, or whether the Conservative Party should do what they decided back in 2005, which is to have a really long campaign, if you like. David Cameron, for example, didn't become leader until just before Christmas back in 2005. I have to say, speaking to lots of the people arriving tonight, the consensus seems to be that the Conservative Party need to think and that they need a long time to have a think. Let's have a listen to some of the Conservatives I managed to catch on the way in. Can we just ask you a quick question about the leadership race, whether you think it should be a long or short campaign?
Oh, I think we need to take our time and have a think.
I think it should be a good race.
It depends what you mean by long, really. I mean, I think that I think we should use the party conference as a platform, but I hope that we're able to reach some decisions soon after that. I wouldn't want it to go on and on. I don't think that's going to help.
But not this summer, then, essentially?
No, not before the summer recess.
I think the new 22 executive should reflect on that and debate it tomorrow when they meet for the first time.
Lots to learn.
Always things to learn in politics.
Now, as I said, this is the most establishment, I think, of establishment parties. It is the Spectator after all. And Nigel Farage is here. I don't think he's ever been here before. I've been to quite a few of these before. And I did ask him whether he now feels he's joined the establishment. He was in the Commons chamber a little bit earlier. He's now attending the Spectator party. He insisted he's not part of the establishment, but he did talk about his joy, I think, walking into the chamber today. He's wanted to become an MP for decades. He finally got the chance to do that today, and to be fair, he could not keep the smile off his face. But as I say, the talk tonight here at the Spectator party in the rain at the start of July is about whether this contest needs to be held in the shortest possible time. But my impression is that this could be a campaign that will last many, many months, because this is a proper fight for the soul of the Conservative Party.
OK, Darren, thanks so much. I hope you're going to be popping in to get a bit more intel for us. Thank you. Right, let's speak to our panel again, Mercy and Matt. Mercy, let's start with you. We should talk about the Conservatives, because it feels like a lot of the focus obviously is on Labour now and that massive majority. But a lot of the question is about the length of the race. What do you think is going to happen? It seems like it might be a longer race. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I think that would be wise, because we've known for several months who the previous cabinet ministers who were popular amongst the party members were. So we do kind of have a gist of who party members might vote for. But either way, I do think the Conservatives need to have a period of reflection, actually. And I think the potential candidates would need to put forward their agenda and their vision for what the Conservative Party needs to be, because it's not simply about sort of quibbling over policies at this point, as Darren said there. It really is about the soul of the Conservative Party. And I think there needs to be a real sense that the next leader has a coherent philosophical, ideological platform that they want to sell, both to the party members and to the public, because they obviously still have ambitions to be the governing party one day. So I do think a period of reflection, a period of people being able to set out their ideological platform would be really helpful, because I do think if we rush into it, it's just not going to solve a lot of the problems, the underlying problems the party has.
Matt, what do you think Labour's preference is on the kind of length of the race?
I think they probably want it to go on for as long as it can, because ultimately they'll end up just tearing strips off each other for a long time and giving the Labour government a free run to do what they want to do in their early months. I think there is a danger for the Conservatives that if it goes on for too long, they give that space for the Labour government to define the past 14 years in much the same way that David Cameron and George Osborne in 2010 had a lot of space and time to blame Labour for the financial crash, to shape how people saw that Conservative government, that Labour government, sorry. And that was something that Labour really struggled to shake off for years. And I think there's a danger for the Conservatives that Labour can do the same to them in reverse. But I also think Mercy's right that you've got to get the choice right, because, 5 years ago, when Labour had suffered a historic defeat, people would have said, there's no way back, they're out of power for a generation. And 5 years later, Keir Starmer is in with an enormous majority. And it's partly because they got the right leader, demonstrably, in electing Keir Starmer. So I think there is hope for the Conservatives that actually they're not necessarily out of power for a generation. Voters are far more volatile than they used to be. So they could potentially win the next election in 5 years. It's not beyond the realms of possibility, but whether or not they do that depends on whether they choose the right leader now. I don't think they can't win the next election in the next 6 months, but they could certainly go quite a long way towards losing it.
Seems like the electorate has become much more volatile. OK, thank you both. We'll come back to you later. Coming up next on the Politics Hub, defence on the agenda for Sir Keir Starmer as he heads to Washington for a NATO summit, calling for allies to strengthen their resolve against Russia. Hello, welcome back. Well, the Prime Minister is today heading to Washington for his very first overseas visit as NATO members gather for a summit to mark the alliance's 75th anniversary. Before he left, he set out what he was hoping to achieve.
My message is very, very clear that this NATO summit is an opportunity for allies to stand together, to strengthen their resolve, particularly in light of that appalling attack against Russian aggression. I'm pleased to have the early opportunity to affirm and reaffirm Labour's strong support, unshakable support for NATO. We're a founding member. It's now the 75th anniversary, but this is an opportunity to send that message in relation to Russian aggression wherever.
Well, let's go to Washington now and speak to our US correspondent, Mark Stone. And Mark, lots of issues for Starmer to deal with when he arrives in the United States, first being his meeting with Joe Biden. And on the NATO front, questions around defence spending and support for Ukraine.
Yes, I think there are three strands to what we'll see over the next couple of days. The first, of course, is the fact that this is Keir Starmer's first big trip, and what a trip it is. He will be among the 31 other members of the NATO alliance here in Washington for a summit that is being described as the biggest event of its kind in 3 decades. Sometimes in politics, timing is luck, and certainly it is luck for Keir Starmer that so soon after he took office, he is here in Washington, where, yes, he will be among those 31 other leaders, able to speak one-on-one to the likes of Emmanuel Macron, to Olaf Scholz of Germany as well, but also to have that Oval Office moment with President Biden, which is going to take place tomorrow afternoon. The second strand is President Biden, clearly a man who is under significant pressure at the moment politically. All eyes will be on him. It's kind of the elephant in the room here at NATO over the next few days. How he, as host, will conduct himself, his ability to be able to get through it, frankly. Many wondering, given the enormity of the event and how he's going to have very long days, extraordinary as it may be to say, given he is the President of the United States, people are genuinely looking to see at his performance. The third most significant, of course, of the strands is Ukraine. That is the key focus here of the NATO 75th birthday as it is. It has, over the course of the past few years, gone through its biggest test with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the focus will be that war, a war which officials have told me today they expect to go on for some time. Vladimir Putin is presenting it as a war where he has the upper hand, evidenced by that attack yesterday in Kyiv and in other cities as well, which I think really has focused minds here among NATO members. Of course, 2 new members of NATO now, Sweden and Finland. Their leaders arrived a short time ago to join those other members of NATO as they struggle to work out how to present unity, how to perhaps reformulate their focus on Ukraine, an umbrella organisation to be created under the umbrella of NATO that will take over what the Americans have been doing for the past few days, which is to get weapons into Ukraine. NATO will take a more formal role in the process of getting those weapons into Ukraine, of training Ukrainian soldiers as well. So an awful lot of different strands, of different focuses at a very important summit. I would say too, Ali, that there is another interesting element to this, and it is that given the state of Western democracies at the moment and the weakness that many leaders find their position to be in, whether it be President Biden, whether it be President Macron, Olaf Scholz in Germany, for once the UK and Keir Starmer feels, I think, pretty confident politically. He comes to Washington with a massive majority. Politically, he is in a much stronger position than many other of his colleagues who he will meet over the course of the next 2 days.
Mark in Washington, thanks so much. Let's bring Mercy and Matt back in, shall we? Mercy, I mean, it's a bit of a steep learning curve on the world stage, isn't it? He's immediately in Washington. There's obviously a huge amount going on globally. How important are these first few days for Keir Starmer kind of cementing his place?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important because this is his first opportunity to signal what his foreign policy positions are going to be like. Of course, he supports NATO, unlike his predecessor, Jeremy Corbyn, who wasn't so supportive, although he hasn't committed, Keir Starmer hasn't committed to increasing defence spending, but we know he supports NATO, we know he supports Ukraine against the Russian invasion, of course. But I think what Keir Starmer is going to do as well is use this opportunity to perhaps start building those alliances with our European partners. We know they want a closer relationship with the EU. The Conservatives are, of course, going to attack them and say they want to bring us back into the European Union. So I do think, perhaps Keir Starmer has to be a bit careful to be seen, obviously, to be making sure Britain's maintaining its stance on NATO and on the global stage, whilst at the same time not being seen to perhaps be using this as an opportunity to kind of try and, get back into the EU or try to build alliances that might signal that he's trying to go in that direction in terms of European Union membership.
Yeah, and the Euro point is really interesting. That's going to be in focus next week when we've got this big meeting here of the European political community. Do you think Keir Starmer's kind of been straight about how close he wants to be with Europe?
I do, yeah, because I don't think he wants to go back into the European Union. I don't think he thinks that that's a good use of time. I don't think it's where he thinks the public are.
What about the kind of single market customs?
Again, I think it's the same principle, really. It would take an enormous amount of time, and there's probably other things that can be achieved with the political capital that he's got. I do think he's been quite upfront because he said he wants closer ties with Europe on things like trade and security, and I think, as Mercy says, this is a good opportunity for him to start building those relationships with other world leaders that are going to be important. The biggest challenge that he's really got is that a lot of the other leaders are going to be quite distracted. I think, Joe Biden's obviously got a lot of stuff going on with the Democratic Party. Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz have got a lot of domestic political problems. And so whereas we've been used to Rishi Sunak going abroad when he's got political problems at home, it's sort of now in reverse.
Thank you. We've got to save a bit of time because we've got a quiz coming up that I know you're both very excited about. Still to come on the Politics Hub. We take pity on the hundreds of new MPs wandering around, a bit lost in Parliament, with a handy quiz, as I say, about Westminster's weird and wonderful quirks.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8, a drink driver who was using his phone and travelling at 141 miles per hour is jailed over the death of an 8-month-old baby. Plus, as the new government declares the Rwanda plan finished, what should the UK do about asylum seekers? And we'll go live to Dortmund, where England fans are preparing for tomorrow night's Euros semi-final. All that and more on the UK Tonight at 8.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
I think it's a procession of the Taliban. Yes, it is. There's the white flag. We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people and putting them into trucks. You either live and recover, or you die.
Okay, so that's like a war.
That's the war, yes.
We help you understand the world with us.
For the past 24 hours, the soldiers have been attacked on a number of occasions. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We've been crushed.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world.
They were convinced the United States would become hooked. Well, they were right. An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a mortar just landed in between us.
The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world.
It's not out of control, but the fib withdrawn. It's so hot.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Well, as we speak, 335 newly elected representatives could well be wandering around Parliament trying to work out where to get a coffee or perhaps figuring out how to get back to their office. And once those issues have been resolved, they'll face the much bigger problem of working out some of the more arcane bits of parliamentary procedure and language. We thought we would help some of them watching and test their knowledge with a little quiz. And lucky you guys. I have to say, this is quite tricky. I didn't know many of these. So we're going to go through some questions about arcane parliamentary procedure. Are you ready?
Probably not, but
go on. Well, it's happening live on TV. Which of these insults are you not allowed to say in the Commons? 1, miserable pipsqueak. 2, hooligan. 3, stupid cow.
Surely it's C.
Yeah, I would think so. But didn't someone say miserable pipsqueak at some point and got maybe told off for it? But yeah, I would agree that C seems the right one.
It's good knowledge. The answer is you're not allowed to say miserable pipsqueak. It's actually a bit of a trick question because they've all previously been disallowed in the Commons.
Okay.
Somebody said stupid cow in the Commons. What?
I think that's right, yeah.
What if they were actually referring to a stupid cow?
That's a very good point. Right, let's go on to the next one. Churchill's statue. Right, which part of Churchill's statue do Conservatives touch for luck on their way into Parliament? This is slightly easy.
You'd have to be quite tall to reach his head, let's be honest.
It's a very good point. Yeah, that's right. And actually, we've got a fun fact here. Rubbed so much that along with the Thatcher statue, they considered roping off the statues. And for bonus point, do you know which similar ritual happens around, which similar Labour statue there's a similar ritual for?
Is it Clement Attlee?
Correct. Oh, amazing. Right, next one. What is referred to, this is easy, as the other place? Outside Parliament, House of Lords, the opposition's constituencies.
House of Lords?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, that's easy. Next one. What can't you wear in the House of Commons?
I'm pretty sure it's a hat.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a hat.
I think I might have accidentally. I think I might have given this away in the break. Scarf, hat, gloves. You guys think it's hat.
We think so.
The answer is hat. Yeah, that's right. And fun fact: MPs could don headgear when raiding a point of order during a vote. However, although this tradition has not survived the Commons modernisation process, and it was about seeing people more easily during the hustle and bustle of a division. Right, OK, next one. A debate can't take place in the Commons without what? A, the mace, B, the Prime Minister, C, everyone having lunch first.
That's the mace.
Yes, it's the mace.
There's some of the debates they last for such a long time that you probably should have lunch
There is
first.
actually research that shows that not having lunch before making decisions leads to worse decisions. There's been judges actually find people guilty more often when in America.
Is that right?
Yeah, well, if they haven't had lunch, there's research into
That's
this.
incredible
So maybe
knowledge.
they should make everybody have lunch first to
You
make
should
better
be in charge of
decisions.
these rules. For sure. OK, right, this is the last one. OK. What does it mean when the Speaker names someone? A, they're suspended, B, appointed to the front bench, or C, they're being given a nickname?
I'm not sure. When Lindsay Hoyle used to call Keir Starmer at PMQs, he used to say, Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer. So I don't know if it's a front bench thing, but I would guess probably suspended.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one.
You are right. That's it. They're suspended if they're named. That was actually really good from both of you. And I think, Matt, did you get nearly all of them?
Oh, I'm not sure if I did.
No, I'm seriously impressed. You got more than me. Well done. And just kind of lastly, it's first week. How do you... I mean, you must be elated. You know, you've been working with Labour members for ages. Let's just ask a couple of vibes questions in this last section. How are the vibes?
I think the vibes on the Labour side are really, really good. I think it does feel like, regardless of what side you're on, we're kind of at a moment of history. Like these big changes, we do have elections every few years, but actually these enormous changes where one party is sort of swept away and another one comes in, we really only have once in a generation. And so we are kind of living through a moment of history. So I think the vibes are historic, if you wanted to...
I must see how you're... I mean, it's not the party that you've been working with, but I guess it's a moment of history.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm off to the Spectator Party, actually, after this, so I'm hoping I will get a better sense of what exactly Conservative MPs and Labour MPs are feeling. But, you know, I think, as you said, it's not great, is it, for the Conservatives? I mean, it's as bad as it can get. So I think they'll probably use this moment to have a nice, party and then get back to business tomorrow.
Thank you both. And if you see our Darren outside the Spectator Party, say hello from us. Well, that is it from us. We will be back tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Up next, it's UK Tonight with Matt Barbette.